Darkness falls in Night City. The ever-present neon lights wash out the color of blood in the streets and light up the new chrome you got installed that day. You keep a firm hand on your automatic pistol as you walk into the bar, trying not to hide how desperate you are for your next job. If you don't get it, you won't just go hungry. You'll be a has-been. And that's just worse, because it's better to burn out than fade away. Hi everyone, I'm Big Mike, and this is the tutorial for Cyberpunk Red. Created by R. Talsorian Games, Cyberpunk Red is the latest iteration of the much-beloved RPG line of the same name. It is a system where players roll 10-sided dice, or D10, to determine the outcome of tasks that might present a challenge. Players must roll over a target number using said D10 with the appropriate combination of statistics and skills that are needed for said roll. Each character in Cyberpunk Red has a role, which is comparable to a class in other, more dungeon-focused systems. These are Rocker Boy, Solo, Netrunners, Techs, Medtechs, Media, Execs, Lawmen, Fixers, and Nomads. Unlike classes, a role only gives a character a unique skill called a role ability, which they alone can use. In short, there is no real way to optimize a role in Cyberpunk, and it's more viable to build up skills as they are needed in the game, depending on the jobs you take. Each character can acquire a life path, a series of past events you can choose from or roll dice for that add to your character's background. There are also life paths unique to whatever roles you've chosen. While some life path options can influence skills you have, they are more likely to influence background information about your character and give your game master, or GM, story elements to work with to raise stakes on the jobs you take. The game uses a combination of statistics, or stats, and skills to modify dice rolls. Stats are your innate abilities and are intelligence, reflexes, dexterity, tech, cool, will, move, body, empathy, and luck. These stats are both added to select skills to contribute to skill rolls and used to derive other statistics like hit points and humanity. These stats can be rolled or bought with points. Empathy and luck are a bit unique in that they can be spent in normal gameplay. Luck points can be spent before a dice roll to add to the final total. Empathy, while contributing to select skill rolls, also determines a derived stat called humanity. A player gets 10 points of humanity for each point of empathy. As the game goes on, there are ways in which characters can lose humanity, mostly by installing artificial electronic enhancements in their bodies, known as cyberware. As the player's humanity decreases, it also affects how they interact with others, and if it reaches 0, they become what's known as a cyber psycho. But there's a whole anime that explains what that's about. Skills are various fields of expertise that the character is trained in. There are multiple skills that the player can use, from things like bribery, gambling, driving land vehicles, and skills for the various weapon categories in the game. Each skill has an appropriate stat that adds to the total modifier that influences the dice roll for that skill. Please note, players can only increase skills as they advance through the game. Attributes remain fixed after character creation, unless you decide to tinker with the meat. On top of that, some skills require twice as many improvement points, this system's currency for experience, to increase due to how challenging they are to learn. In addition, players can buy weapons, cybernetic enhancements, clothing, food, and living arrangements based on the money they make during the game, so a big part of this system is going on dangerous missions where you can be double-crossed just to make a payout that'll keep you alive a bit longer. That's not even counting the reputation you can gain on the street that you increase the more jobs you take. The amount of equipment in the game as well as the various add-on books are too extensive to go into any detail for a tutorial of reasonable length, so we encourage you to buy the books and have fun. And now combat. Cyberpunk Red is an interesting mix of past R. Talsorian combat engines and their current Witcher system. That's completely meaningless to those of you new to these systems, so we'll take it from the top. First of all, initiative, or the order in which characters act, is determined by rolling reflex plus 1d10. Highest goes first. On a player's turn, they can take one move action and one other action, which will probably be somewhat attack related, though there are other actions that are available in the book. Since you didn't come to play Cyberpunk and not fire the cool guns you bought, let's start with that. To hit an opponent with a weapon, the player must add their reflex, the relevant weapon skill, and 1d10. That total number must be higher than the target's DV or defensive value. Ties go to the defender. In Cyberpunk, people can't dodge ranged attacks unless their reflex is 8 or higher, so the target's DV is determined by both the weapon type used to hit them and the distance they are from the attacker via a lovely chart in the book. Got that? Good, because it gets harder. Each gun has an ROF, or rate of fire. That means for each attack action per round, you can choose to fire that weapon that many times. So if you have a gun that has an ROF of 2, you can fire at the target 2 times. There's some odd rules here about wielding multiple weapons, both melee and ranged in the same round, depending on ROF, but it's very confusing and I'm an idiot. Additionally, some weapons have auto-fire, and that's its own mechanic because machine guns. Here is how it works. First, you must have enough bullets loaded to use the auto-fire action for that weapon. Next, you roll reflex with your auto-fire skill and subtract the target's DV from your result. That difference is what you multiply your damage by. Now, this isn't something you can really abuse infinitely, as each weapon type has a maximum number of times you can multiply the damage by for auto-fire, and you'll have to look at the book for that, as well as the table for auto-fire difficulty depending on the range and type of weapon. There's even more rules for shotguns and grenades, but once again, they're in the book. Go read it. However, I will explain melee combat. Melee works remarkably similar to ranged combat. An attacker combines their dex and the relevant melee attack skill, one of which is sick martial arts skills for you fans of that kind of thing, and 1d10. The defender combines their dex, their evasion skill, and 1d10 to evade the attack. In all combat scenarios, weapons deal damage, typically a certain amount of d6s. This is negated by the stopping power or SP of any armor the target is wearing. Whatever damage remains is dealt to the target's hit points. Any armor that fails to prevent all damage from hitting the player is reduced by 1 until it's ultimately repaired. As more damage is done, the player receives penalties to all actions at half health and then again when they are less than 1 HP. At that point, if you dip below 1 HP, you have to roll a death save to get back to 1 HP and be unconscious. If you fail, that's the end and they're naming a drink after you in a bar. It makes the typical Friday night firefight a dangerous place to be, so sometimes it's better to avoid combat entirely, unlike what certain recent video games about the franchise might have told you. There are critical injuries in this system, however they only occur when rolling damage in melee and ranged attacks. If you roll 2 6s or more, that causes a critical injury. Yes, there's a lovely table for that. No, I'm not sharing it. Go read the book. And that's Cyberpunk Red. It encourages you to live fast, die young, and be as stylish as possible. If you liked what you saw, check it out. The rest of you can watch us play it on D20 Live.